Okay, so we start out at the Certified Associate quiz PDF, and as we scroll down, we'll come to the downloadable Excel file that is the data source for all these questions. So we're just going to download it, and then we're going to get Power BI all set up to import it and to analyze it. Okay, so I'm just putting it into a nice little folder on our desktop, and then booting up Power BI. I might fast forward this bit because it takes a little while. Okay, so Power BI is all set up. So we're going to save the Power BI file into that same folder. And then the first thing we're going to do is go to a few options and deselect the defaults. So these are all about Power BI trying to help rookie users or brand new users, but they sort of actually interfere further down the track. So we turn those all off. Okay, so let's go down and grab that Excel file. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 sheets that we're bringing in. Okay, and now we can see the 3 different tables coming through, and we can see there's a bit of an issue there with all the column names being column 1, 2, and 3. So when it's bringing in a sheet as opposed to a table as formatted in a table in Excel, we've got to do this, use the first row as headers operation. And then we're going to reference that initial orders because we need to split that up into different tables, so dimensions and fact tables, so we can do our star schema. So here we go, we're starting off with a customer table. So we just need name and region as well, we determined is unique to particular customers. So this sort of requires a bit of knowledge and understanding about the how this data might be stored in its original database. And this is just a little check that I do just to make sure that each customer ID has only got one row after we remove duplicates. And that was just checking that there's no multiple regions for each customer. Okay, so now we're making our products table. And this one is interesting because we've got product category, subcategory, category and name, but we don't have a unique product ID. So if we go ahead and remove duplicates, we can add an index column and then just call that product ID. Okay, but we need to go back now and make the orders table. We're just going to call it order. And the first thing we need to do is we need to bring in that product ID, because we can use that product ID to stand in place for those 3 columns. Okay, so you'll see what happens in a second. So we only want to bring in the product ID column and put it on there. So that allows us to remove the columns relating to, as you can see. So I guess this is just making the Power BI data model more efficient. Alright, and then we're going ahead and removing those columns relating to customers, because we'll be able to link those in a second. And that's all looking good. We go ahead and format those dates as dates. We actually come back to this later on and format the rest of the columns in the appropriate formats. But yep, so now it's refreshing. Okay, so we can see as well that we've still got our original order table in there. So we actually don't want that to come through to the data model. So we right click on it and then untick that enable load. And you'll watch it, it'll disappear. Yep. So there we go. We've got order table, that's going to be our fact table, and we've got customer and product, they're going to be our dimension table. So we can zoom in and go ahead and link those up. Connect the foreign key to the primary key, and then we just hide the foreign key in the fact table. Once again, do the same thing with product ID. Okay, so that's great. We've got our star schema model at least starting up. The next thing we've got to make is a date table. So we click here, and I've got a snippet saved, so I just type in this shortcut and it produces me all those all that DAX code, if you will. And another thing to note, you've got to sort those columns. So this is a bit of an annoying step that we have to do, but yeah, we've got to go through and tell Power BI how to sort each of those columns when it's making the visualizations. So this is sort of the default sort, if you will. We've also got to identify that that table is a date table, and then specify that date is the column. This is just for time intelligence functions that we're going to be using later on. And then we go on ahead and we hook that up. So we're going to actually at the moment hooking it up to order date, because that's going to be most of our questions are going to be around, you know, order date timeframes. Okay. I'm just hiding it from the main date table. Okay, dokie. So that's all looking good. Looks like we're ready to make our first visualization. But I chuck in sales, and you'll notice that it's actually coming through, and it's being interpreted as text, not a numerical value. So we've got to go back to the PowerQuery and just fix up our column types. So I think I go first and I do all the decimal columns. And then I go through and I do all the whole number columns. And it's important to have these the same data type for the joins. So the star schema joins that we did before in the data model, it's I think it can handle decimal and number differences, but not text and number differences. So that's why we just go through and correct all these now. Once again, we're going to save and close. Okay, and so note we've got those sigma signs next to the columns that can be summed up. And there we have it. We just make it so a nice little metric there of total sales. And this is where I introduce you to the concept of measures. Okay, so we're going to make a measures table, and I use the underscore at the start just to make sure that it goes to the top of the list of data tables to choose from. Going to make a new measure, which is going to be the same. So it's an explicit measure of the total sales rather than the way we did it before, which was dragging it in and using the default aggregation method of sum. So this is going to look the same. Yep. Then we don't need that column 1 anymore. We can just go ahead and delete that. And then when we hide and close the fields view, notice how it changes from a table to a measures, collection of measures. Okay. One other thing to note as well is that I'm going to make some dummy measures here. So new measure 1 and new measure 2. So if we go back to the model view, we can actually group measures and indeed any other sort of columns from tables into folders, which might be useful down the track to manage all those variables, dimensions and measures, manage them a bit better. But we're just going to get rid of it for now because we don't really need it. Okay, and so the next thing I'm going to show here, we're closing it down and we're going to make a change to the folder path, the file path, if you will. And this is sort of to represent what would happen if you sent this Power BI file and data to someone else that was working on it. So they'd have a different file path to get to the file. And it's just showing you how the visualizations, they still come through, as does the data in the model. So that's all saved, absolutely, if you will, in the Power BI file. But notice in a second, notice how when we go to the queries, it's unable to import fresh data. So it can't re-import those queries because the source location is incorrect. Okay. So one way I found to work around this is to make a parameter. I call it FilePath, and I just set this parameter as a text to the location of the Power BI file. So it's going to use the location of the Power BI file to locate the actual data, the Excel file that we needed. So I've also got a little snippet here, and it doesn't work the first time. I'll just show it to you. Okay, so that has worked. It's just a bit difficult to see. So it's taking the file, the Power BI file, then truncating out the file name, and then it's concatenating that with the file name of the Excel file. So in a way, it's a relative location relative to the Power BI file. And what it means is that you can use that as the data source for each of those three importing tables. Yep. And what that means is that if you do send the Power BI file to someone else, as we'll close it down now and demonstrate, but it just means that you only have to update the query code in one place, and that is with that parameter. So I'm just going to close it down now and demonstrate. Okay, so as we go back into the queries, we can see that they're currently not working, but in order to make them work, we just simply have to update this location of the PBIX file. Then hit OK, and all the other ones they're currently working. They found their data source. So that's fantastic. There's one other thing that's important to know, and I'll come to this in a second. And that is that Power BI can actually download a web-based Excel file for us. So I'm just going to pull up the URL of that downloadable file that we got before. We're going to select a web-based data source and paste in that URL. And this is a sort of reflective of a situation where you might be given an extract from a database in CSV, and you'll have to work out your, data wrangling and then the measures for that. But then down the track, you'll be given a live connection to the database. And so you'll have to replace one data source with another from in the queries. So this is just sort of demonstrating that a little bit as well. So here we can actually go ahead and copy the source here, which is the web-based source, and paste that into the source, which used to be the Excel file, actually the relative Excel file. And as you notice, it's still working fine. So Power BI must download and put in a temp file somewhere or something like that. I'm not too sure 100% what it does, but it works. And now this is a true location that shouldn't really change unless Tableau go ahead and delete that file online. But yeah, so we no longer need the parameter, and we no longer need these web-based imports because we've copied the import code. Okay, so I think that's covered. We've got the measures covered, and we've got different data sources covered, and the star schema and data model. So it looks like we're almost ready to start answering some questions.